Okay, hello, my name is Andrew Short. I'm here from CERN to talk to you about our implementation of records management. Maybe before I start, just so I have an idea of what I can tell you and get away with, how many people actually know what CERN is? And who knows what CERN actually does? Okay, yeah, I was hoping somebody else could explain it to me, but we're all in the same boat then. Okay, so I've got a lot of slides. I'll go as quick as I can. I'll not try to read everything off here. I'll leave that to you. I'll try and sum up CERN in 5 minutes. So a bit of a break from archives and records management. We'll do the easy stuff, particle physics to start with. So CERN is a European laboratory for particle physics. It sits on the Swiss-French border. The border's here, near Geneva, Switzerland. This is the airport, and it's mainly known for the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider. It's a big particle accelerator that accelerates particles to almost the speed of light, 99.9999991% the speed of light. Remember that, because I'll test you later on it. And this is the LHC, this here. So this big circle here, it's about 100 meters underground. It's 17 miles long, so you could almost walk from here to Gatwick in the tunnel. And that's where in these points here, they have these big detectors, big digital cameras if you want, where they collide particles into each other and they see what comes out. So it looks a little bit like this. In fact, it's more than just one accelerator, it's a whole complex. The best way can explain this is like the gears on your car. You can't start your car in going 70 miles an hour. You have to build up speed, so you go through the gears. And at CERN, this is our gear 1, this LINAC 2. It's a linear accelerator, so it's a straight line. It's the quickest way to build up speed in particles. And then we start injecting it into gear 2, gear 3, gear 4, and then into this big one is the LHC with these 4 points on for the experiments here. And this is what the particles look like when they're going around. So there's 2 beams going in opposite directions, and at these 4 points, they collide them into a collision event that looks a little bit like this. I love animated GIFs, if you haven't guessed already. So this is inside one of the detectors, so the big digital camera, and it basically, when you collide the two particles together, different things come out, and we want to know what those different things that come out are. So new particles are created. It kind of creates conditions near to the beginning of the universe. Only the digital cameras that CERN use are like this. This is about 5 stories high. It weighs a couple hundred tons, 1,000 tons. It's like Find Wally. There is a guy standing in there somewhere, and the beam goes straight through the middle and collides inside here. And basically, like a camera, it detects the particles when they go through the detector, and it records all of this as data. So this is what happens when you become the third person, nearly last person to present. This guy's been mentioned at least 3 times in the presentation so far today. As Tim Berners-Lee. He invented the World Wide Web at CERN, as we all know by now. And part of the reason why he did it was for scientists to collaborate together to work on documents from around the world. But because you've shown this picture before, what you haven't seen is this picture. And this is the computer that he developed the World Wide Web on. And because I'm a geek, I have to tell this story. He basically, every night or every so often, the World Wide Web would go off. It would switch off. There was 2 web servers. This was one of them, and it would just stop working. So he doesn't know why, and he's really worried. Thinks there's some problem in the code, so he's working late one day. And the cleaner comes in and unplugs the computer so she can vacuum the floor. So he put a little note on the box. This is a server, do not power down. So there you go. The cleaner was switching off the World Wide Web at one point. So again, I'll not go through all the figures, but quickly, we have around 18,000 distinct users scattered around the world, different places, different laboratories, all contribute towards CERN. This is some of the users that we have at CERN. This is John Elliott. He's a famous physicist at CERN, and this is what his office looks like. He's not alone, in fact. There's many physicists that look Apparently, this professor can find any paperwork in this office in less than 5 seconds. I don't know how he manages it, but it's arguably faster than the electronic system that we have now. Okay, so basically I told you all this to give you a background of CERN, of what we do, and our job is to kind of look after the machines and look after the people who look after the machines. So out of all those 18,000 people, there's only around 2% of that who are actually physicists, and everybody else are people like me, they're software engineers or developers, this kind of jobs. So we implemented, well, we were asked by Records Office to have a look at the current situation. So this is what they were like in the 60s and 70s. I don't think much has changed. Maybe the dresses are coming back into fashion, but it was like this for a very long time in the organization. In 2015, we were contacted to ask, can we improve this situation? I couldn't help with the dresses very much, but I can try and give them an electronic system. So we started asking them to scan the current active members of personnel's files. This is around 3,000 files, and in those files it's comprised of, depending on how long the member of personnel has been at CERN, it can be files this thick or just a couple of pages. And from those files they identified 230 different types of documents that belong in those files, things like your CV, birth certificates, passports, and things like this. And so they started scanning all of these, and this is what Records Office looked like in 2015. So these are only the current active personnel files, all the rest are in the archives in the basement. And in 2016, we managed to get it empty. And it's still like this today, hopefully. So we chose an off-the-shelf product called Alfresco. You know, when you're working in a physics lab, when you release a product on Star Wars Day on May the 4th, they've been actively uploading personnel files since this date. They've uploaded 183,000 documents manually, but we also inject documents from other systems in the organizations. So the recruitment tool and things like this, they can inject documents into our records management system. I think a lot of the presentations earlier touched on the point where we don't want to be another silo of information that we can't talk to everybody else. So we've got some APIs, some ways for other applications to speak to our application, because I'll go into a bit more detail on this in a minute actually. But they identified even more documents. So we got to 285 document types out of the 230 that they initially identified. This is what the UI looks like. So this is pretty much Alfresco out of the box. There's not a lot happening on this page, but you can see your recent activities, the documents that you've viewed, and you can start favoriting documents. And this is where we start getting a bit more interesting. We have the file plan, so all of the documents which are structured in a more organized way than they were previously. And to be able to search on this, they can search using the person's ID number, they can search using names. We have the facet filters down the side, which we've seen in some of the other presentations before. And it's a much quicker way to be able to find and retrieve all of the documents. This is what it looks like when you open one of the documents. So the document itself here, the pan. So we get all of the metadata about the person and about the document as well, and there's many more down the bottom here. We wanted the system to be as easy to use as possible. So we spoke with Records Office, and we basically looked through all of the files that they had. They identify all the documents that they currently store in paper format. We go through all of those, and then they identified the metadata that they want to keep, what they need to search on, and what's important for searching and access rights. And from this, we managed to reduce the metadata down to only 3 fields. So we asked them for who, what, and when, more or less. And from that, we can reach to the databases in the back end, and we can pull out much more metadata so we know more about the person. So you, as a user, would enter the person's name, but as the system and the metadata and the search, you can find much more. So I know the person's contract dates, the contract status of the person, birth dates, and things like this. And we do the same for the document types. So all of this is to be able to search for and to structure the data and to create the file plan. so we can structure this in a much more organized way. And to be able to do that, we created a new access rights system on top of Alfresco out of the box, which can do much more powerful searches and restrictions on access rights and things like this. Because we're using an out-of-the-box product, we used Alfresco, we knew we needed to spend some time on the UI to change this. So we looked through the product and see what needs customized and where. This is more for whether we were in the document management world or the records management world or the archives, where we sat with this product, because we already have at CERN, we already have document management solutions. I think like most big organizations, you have more than one place, more than one silo, if you like, of where we store the data. And we wanted to know how we could work with those and where we sit in this world. And again, Alfresco, I'm not trying to sell you anything here, but Alfresco comes in two different flavors. One's a free open source, the community edition, and the other is a commercial paid for edition, and we use the community edition. So very quickly, I want to highlight on here is just I was quite surprised at how long it took us to actually do all of the identification of metadata, to collect all of the access rights, to understand the old paper way of doing things. Because it was all on paper, there was no rules for a lot of this thing. Nobody knew how many document types there were, or where they were used, or their flow through the organization. So it took quite a long time to be able to identify all of this. Then we started using documents from ERT as our recruitment tool. So when you apply to a post at CERN, you upload your CV, maybe a birth certificate, and your diplomas and things like this. So we automatically collect these when you're recruitment stage, and we inject these into the archive, into the records management as soon as you're hired at the organization. We developed the monitoring tools and admin screens, and now we're basically, well, we've been expanding for the new services, new documents, and more recently we're migrating to the new version. And we've touched on a couple of times OCR services. So we've implemented an OCR service that has OCR'd all the old documents in the system, and it continuously OCRs the new documents which are uploaded as well. And case management I'll touch on in a minute. Okay, so this is the original upload screen, the off-the-shelf product. It's not very flexible. As a user, if you upload this, you can't see your PDF, you can't rotate it, you have no idea what each of these documents are. So you'd have to find the document, open it, edit it, and it was a very cumbersome mechanism. So we developed a brand new UI for this, a new user interface, where this is the list of documents where the user has dragged and dropped, and then they just identify what type of document it is, who it's for, and a couple of dates in this case. And they can see the PDF, which is much nicer than before. They can rotate and zoom and all of these things. All of the documents that we get, we put into a big unrecognized folder, so nobody can see them until they're properly classified, until you've told us what it is, who it's for. And when you tell us all of this information, we automatically file it. So because you told me maybe it was a passport, or in this case it's an advancement letter, and you tell me who it's for and the dates, you don't have to put it into the file structure. I can automatically move it into the right place in the folder structure. So every document in the organization is filed in the same way, as long as the metadata that was entered is correct. This also applies to the access rights for the document. Because you've told me who it's for and what it is, I can apply the access rules and the permissions to say, okay, this is a passport for this person. That means this list of people are allowed to see it. So there's no extra user steps involved in this. Okay, I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to be quick. So we've done monitoring screens as well, just to make sure that the application is up, it's running, and it's stable. We have admin screens to be able to support all of these changes that we've got. For support, we have a support line as well. If somebody has a question, we can answer it using these admin screens. As I mentioned before, we now have an OCR service running in the background so that you can search on the content of documents in the search screen and not just the metadata that's been entered. And we have initial drafts, at least, of the smart folders. And this is a concept of we have one version of a document, but that one document is useful in many cases around the organization. So if I use your birth certificate, for example, maybe they need this in the recruitment unit and they need it for your school fees. And we only want one copy of the document, but it should be in several folders, if you like, around the organization. Okay, so the next steps, we want to replace all of the user interface that's from Alfresco out of the box. It's okay for a service to use where you can train the service, but it's not very intuitive for individual people to use. We would like to open this to be more of a self-service, so users can upload their own passports and things like this, and they're not reliant on a service to do this. We want to integrate it better with more of the other silos around the organization. So already we are working with recruitment, so the recruitment team. So they're building a new application, and they're going to ask for your documents when you apply to CERN. They'll ask for your CV, and we know what metadata we need to archive that CV. So we allow the recruitment tool to ask us, what information will I need when I archive this document? And it'll ask the user the same questions that we need when we come to archive it. So we're really starting to think about this as a whole process in the life cycle of a document from its creation to the end. Case management I touched on before. Disposition schedules, I was talking to a few people before about this. We don't have any, is the short answer to this. We've been collecting paper as an organization for 63 years, and it's hard to change people's minds on this. So part of we have paper files, we have archives, they're stored in the basement, but I don't want, ideally, to be in the same situation with an electronic system. It would be nice that we do come up with some rules for more clear disposition schedules. I also touched on this before. We'd like to open our records management system to all users at CERN for transparency of data, so you can see the files that the organization has on you, and you can see everything that we have, and then you can, if you want, you can ask for the right to be forgotten and all of the steps after this. And finally, we have been doing document management more or less since the web was born. We have a document tool called EDH, Electronic Document Handling Tool, and it has workflows behind. So we use this for things like your leave, or if you want to change address, or if you want to buy something. And the idea is you fill in this online form, which asks all the relevant questions with all the validation behind it, and then it launches a workflow. And that document goes to every service. It goes to your supervisor or whoever is involved in the routing of the document. Is asked to sign the document for approval. And we'd like to be able to do the same thing with our records management, to be able to have maybe a second check of a second pair of eyes checking a document to say, yes, this is really what we say that it is. This will maybe be used for more confidential documents like disciplinary actions and things like this. Okay, I think that's about me. Yes, thank you. Just before I go, and just so I'm allowed out of the office again, can I have a show of hands of anybody who feels that they know a little bit more about CERN now? Okay, I'm allowed out the office, thank you.